Hello everyone. Today we'll be talking about stress. So what is stress? Stress literally means a force from the outside world acting upon an individual and is a phenomenon we have all experienced. The term stress was first used in the 1930s by the endocrinologist Hans Selye to describe the responses of lab animals to various stimuli. Originally, Selye meant stress to be the response of an organism to a perceived threat or stressor, but the term is now used to mean the stimulus rather than the response. When presented with a stressor of any type, everyone will produce a reaction to that stress, and this is a normal physiologic event. However, if the reaction is prolonged, too intense, or atypical in some way, stress can become abnormal and cause problems. So, this was a study that was done to see that what causes stress. So, there's a stress ranking. So, death of a spouse leads to 100, divorce 73, marital separation 65, imprisonment 63, death of a close family member 63, personal injury or illness 53, marriage 50, and so on and so forth, as you can see on the diagram. So this is a rating where 100 is the most stressful event recorded, with relatively less stressful situations having progressively lower values. So what is the normal response to stressful events? The normal stress response has got three components. One, a somatic fight or flight response. Two, an emotional response. Three, a psychological response that aims to reduce the potential impact of the experience and help to cope with the situation at hand. So, what is the somatic response? Human physiology has evolved a variety of mechanisms to deal with perceived threats. The core components of the stress response are the sympathetic nervous system and the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. When a threatening situation occurs, the sympathetic nervous system is activated, releasing epinephrine, which is also known as adrenaline, from the adrenal medulla. Epinephrine then causes the fight or flight response, which activates the body ready to flee from or deal with a threat. Both stress itself and firing of the locus coeruleus pons activates the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, which leads to release of glucocorticoids from the adrenal cortex. So this is basically a diagram that's explaining the same thing. As we can see, stress activates the locus coeruleus pons, whereby the hypothalamus and sympathetic nervous system are both activated. Hypothalamus stimulates the release of corticotropin releasing hormone, which activates the anterior pituitary to release adrenocorticotropic hormone, which activates the adrenal cortex, which releases cortisol. So what are the effects of cortisol? Gluconeogenesis and hyperglycemia, protein catabolism, fat storage, increased sodium and decreased potassium, increased blood pressure, increased water loss, immunosuppression, decreased bone formation, and anti-inflammatory effect. And what are the effects of the activation of sympathetic nervous system? So sympathetic nervous system activates the adrenal medulla, which stimulates the release of epinephrine. So what are the effects of epinephrine? Increase in heart rate, increased contractility, flushing and sweating, increased respiratory rate, decreased peristalsis, vasodilation in the skeletal muscles, vasoconstriction in general inhibition of lacrimation and salivation, pupil dilatation, loss of hearing, bladder and colon relaxation, hyperreflexia. So as you can see, the effects of cortisol and epinephrine, these are common effects that we see in any person that's under stress. So not all the symptoms are visible, but then there are some that are very common. So what is the emotional response? Emotional response to stressful events are of three kinds: the response to danger, the response to a threat, and the response to separation and loss. So the response to danger is fear, the response to a threat is anxiety, the response to separation or loss is depression. Typically, the first two stresses are accompanied by sympathetic nervous system arousal as outlined above, whilst the latter leads to reduced physical activity, which is depression. So psychological changes that reduce the impact of stressful events. So one thing that happens is difficulty in recall and numbing. People who have experienced stressful circumstances tend to have difficulty in recalling the details of the experiences. They may also experience an unexpected absence of feeling about the events. Numbing Freud suggested that both these responses are caused by an active but unconscious mental process which he called repression. Then coping strategies. People cope with anxiety in a variety of ways. The actions are of two kinds: adaptive strategies which reduce stress in both the short and long term, and maladaptive strategies which are effective in the short term but lead to difficulties in the long term. Adaptive coping strategies include the avoidance of situations that cause distress, working through problems, and coming to terms with situations. Avoidance ceases to be adaptive when it is continued for so long that it prevents working through and coming to terms with the situation. Then these maladaptive coping strategies include the excessive use of alcohol or drugs, discharging emotion through histrionic or aggressive behavior, and deliberate self-harm. Avoidance that is at first adaptive becomes maladaptive if it is continued for too long, since this interferes with other adaptive responses. Culturally determined coping strategies. In some cultures, open displays of extreme distress are socially accepted and adaptive means of discharging emotion. For example, after the sudden death of a loved one, in cultures where such displays are not the norm, they may, they may be maladaptive because they seem excessive and thereby lose the sympathy of potential helpers. So, strategies for coping with stressful experiences: potentially adaptive avoidance, working through problems, coming to terms with situations; maladaptive excessive use of alcohol or drugs, histrionic or aggressive behavior, and deliberate self harm. So, that's all about stress. If you like the video, please like, subscribe, comment. Thank you.